You're listening to Field Day with Katie Black.
Okay, you guys, welcome to the first ever episode of Field Day with Katie Black. My first guest I have here, welcome, Ed Smith is in the house.
Katie, thank you so much for having me. And as you just mentioned, this is your first. First off, congratulations. And I'm honored to be the inaugural guest on your show.
Well, thank you so much. Yes, I'm so excited. So before we get into what you're currently doing now in life, I always try to ask people, where were you born? Where'd you grow up?
I am a native, born and raised of New Jersey. They always joke and say Jersey is a great place to be from. Like I said, born and raised. I'm dating myself. I graduated from high school in 1987. Was signed to go to the University of North Carolina on a full baseball scholarship, and everybody wanted me to play football as well. I kind of turned down all the other offers, signed my letter to the University of North Carolina. Then, lo and behold, the White Sox came knocking at my door that year in 1987. I got drafted in the 7th round, went back and forth with them for a little bit, eventually signed to start my professional baseball career right out of high school. And from there, Katie, I've just been traveling the globe all over the place between two professional sports, but everything started in South Jersey. We give a shout out to Pemberton Township High School. Go Hornets.
What's up? Well, it's always interesting. Obviously, we'll get into like your football career later, but so obviously to play baseball and football, we're just like as a youth, like you just knew you were an athlete. Like,
yeah,
you know what I mean?
One of those things, Katie, where everybody has those gifts, and sometimes they're realized and unrealized. I think very early on in life, everybody kind of saw my athletic ability. And on the flip side, I've got no musical talent. I've got no artistic talent. I have a lot of other things I'm not very good at. But sports was something like almost, my mom and dad would always tell us stories right out of the womb. From 2 years old, I was shooting baskets and stuff like that. And it just, got an early start into the world of athletics, followed my dreams and my passions, which baseball was my main focus early on. And just to let you know, I tried football one time at the age of 8 and did not like it at all. And my mom wouldn't let me quit that year because I remember going home after that first practice, my brother and myself, he's 2 years younger than me, but I told her, Mom, I don't like this. I don't want to play. And she said, well, that's fine and dandy, but we don't quit things in this house. So we're going to have to figure out how to get you through this first season. And from there, you can pick and choose, so I gutted it out, if you want to call it that. Played that 1 year of football, actually played soccer from the time along with basketball, baseball, soccer, all the way till I was in high school at 14, dropped soccer, ended up going to football. And that's the rest was history after that. I kind of blossomed. But yeah, all the other sports, I loved everything, really, really competitive. And, the fact that I played a whole bunch of different sports that made me, in my opinion, a much more rounded athlete. By the time I got to high school, because of the soccer, I turned out to be not only the starting tight end, I played defensive end as well, but then I did all the kicking throughout all the way from my freshman year through my senior year as well. 1 year I was actually all-state punter along with all-state tight end, but I did the kicking, the punting, everything. And that's only because of those found skills with the early introduction to soccer, along with everything else I was doing.
Oh my goodness. Well, I'm sure you have a long list of friends, no?
Yes. And the thing about it, Katie, I like to keep, a lot of people, they leave things behind. I had people going all the way back to my first T-ball team when I was 5 years old. We all grew up, went to high school, grade school, whatever, all the way through high school. I have those friends as well as a ton of people I've met along the way through my professional sports career, whether it be coaches, teammates, people that worked. I was my old radio man. I'm one of my really great friends, Andrew Monaco. We were on buses together in the minor leagues. He eventually started working with the Orlando Magic, then went out to the Spurs. He's now the voice of the Texas A&M Aggies. He does basketball, baseball, and football. But like I said, that's a relationship I've had since, riding buses together in 1994 with the Orlando Cubs in AA, in the Southern League.
Very cool. So, well, I guess, so much to unpack, but essentially, what was it like to get drafted that first time?
It was amazing. It was really as great a time was also a difficult time because I had gone through the whole, I guess trying to figure out because everybody wanted me to play football while I was in high school. That was the big glory sport. I wanted to be a baseball player. And so, I went through all the, every college in the country coming to my school, wanting to recruit me, all the long talks with head coaches, all that to tell them in the end, hey, I want to play baseball in college. And, a lot of the coaches, they still put the press on, hey, we can come and you can play on a football scholarship and we'll let you play football or baseball on the side as well. And I knew it would happen. I'd seen it before. They get you there on a football scholarship. Eventually, baseball is less of a priority, so they talk you into. So I was very adamant about the fact I wanted to chase my own dream, not do what everybody else wanted me to do. In the end, I chose University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill on a full baseball scholarship, and I promised them that I would play football on the side. So I flipped it on them. And then after that was all said and done to get drafted and then have to, go back and forth with that portion of the decision, whether I come right out of high school, obviously my coach at the time, my coach would, sign me from University of North Carolina. Every day he's calling me, trying to convince me that the scholarship and to come to North Carolina. And I got the White Sox, every time my scout, Ed Ford, would come, he's sweetening the offer a little bit. And so when it was all said and done, it was, I'm not going to say it was a headache because I enjoyed the final outcome of the decision. But, at 17, soon to, by the time I signed my first contract, I turned 18 just a couple of days before graduating and being on a plane to go to Florida to start my professional baseball career. But it was a lot, it wasn't as easy as most because I had so much kind of to weed through. But in the end, I thank God for that decision and a whole bunch of others that I made, even though it wasn't what you call a rosy, everything went perfect. Once I made my decisions, I had a lot of things to deal with along the journey of my career, but everything led to something else. And I'm very, like I said, not many people can say they played two professional sports. I remember when I did get drafted, how, and I was always a highly touted out athlete, but just, all that came with it, the glory of being that dude in high school, being drafted, and it made my family proud. I was proud of my accomplishments, but like I said, it was definitely a lot to get through in those first few years.
Oh, I'm sure. So, my understanding is like about 9 or 10 years later, after baseball is when you went into the NFL, right? Is that correct?
Yeah, I did it for 9 years. I say I topped out at AAA. So it wasn't like I had to put the time in. Mm-hmm. I climbed up the ladder in 1995. After 9 years, I'd come to a crossroad in my mind where it was time to do something different with my life. And I wasn't sure what it was at the time while I'm trying to make some of these decisions. And football popped into my head, but I also had to realize I hadn't played football in 10 years. Last time I put your uniform on was in high school, my senior year of high school in 1986. So, after almost talking myself out of it a whole bunch of times, I had some conversations with my brother who was by then, he's 2 years younger than me, but by then he'd been through 4 years at Notre Dame with Lou Holtz and had gotten into the league, first round pick with the New Orleans Saints in 93. And we're, like I said, fast forward into 1995. He's getting ready for his first year or third year in the NFL. And I called him one night, middle of my baseball season in 95, and I threw this crazy idea at him that, I was thinking about maybe hanging up the cleats after 9 years, and football had crossed my mind, and was almost hoping he would tell me I was crazy by thinking about what I was planning on doing if I got his blessing. And, instead he told me, hey, look, man, if anybody can do it, you can. And anything I can do to assist you, I will, obviously. And that sparked the idea of, hey, okay, maybe I'm not being crazy. So I finished once again, I'm not a quitter. I wasn't going to walk away from even that last season of baseball, even though I knew what I was planning on doing moving forward. And I actually finished those last 2.5 months out with the Indians. By then I was with them After that year, I went and got in shape, ended up in the spring of 96 going over to the World League of American Football. One, actually able to win a job in that league. Came back here to the States after about 3 months of football, not including an injury. I almost lost everything before it even happened. I blew out my MCL while over there in Europe. I was with the Frankfurt Galaxy, but things worked out. I got back here after playing a few games or 3 games after my injury, got back here to the States and went right into my first training camp in the NFL that summer. And lo and behold, I played a few years. And I'm sure you might have a question about my football career, but yeah, I was able to make my way into the NFL, and kind of get that second professional career started.
Yeah, my goodness, that's amazing. I'm also too like analytical. So when you say, can you talk about your injury or like, did you immediately knew as soon as it happened that it was bad?
Oh yeah, yeah. I was actually blocking, and it was game 4. So I went over there. I'd done something. Here I was a tight end. Knew I was a former baseball player. All everybody wanted to do was talk about, wow, this dude's out there. He's a tight end. Haven't played football in 10 years, and he made the team here. And he's, at one point in a second or third game, I made a catch in the back of the end zone against the London Monarchs. Turned out, and this is, I'm really dating myself now, the George Michael Sports Machine was still it was a show back here, and I was actually the play of the week on the George Michael Sports Machine. That kind of got some notoriety and things like that. And this former baseball player over there doing these things. And I was at game 4 against London. No, it was against who was it? It was against regardless who it was against. Got caught up blocking. Running back got tackled behind me. They both landed on my knee, and I felt and heard the pop like it was, I knew immediately something was wrong. But believe it or not, Katie, I actually finished that last drive. We were trying to score to put the game away. Finished that last drive on nothing but grit. The next day, we went and had an MRI done. And, my trainers, they kept thinking, well, kind of good sign that you were able to finish the game, and maybe it's just a sprain. Doctor came in after they did the MRI, and he put the sheet up on the board. And he's like, oh, yeah, you totally ruptured your MCL. And it was like one of those, oh, my God, it was just as fast as I made the transition. It was like, man, this is it. But, they put me on a plane. Instead of doing surgery, they flew me back from Germany to Alabama Health South, which was where they sent all the players when they were dealing with injuries. So I came all the way back across the pond, rehab for 4 weeks instead of doing surgery. If I'd done surgery, I was out probably 2 to 3 months, whereas the rehab I did, I was rehabbing 6 days a week, 7 actually, because I was trying to get in there on Sundays as well. They would only let me go 6.5 days, but I rehabbed for 4 weeks, building up scar tissue to take the place of the MCL. And every day when I left, we were 4-0. While I was gone, they lost the next 4 games. My team, they were calling from all the way from Germany, is he ready yet? Is he ready yet? And after 4 weeks, I don't know how I did it. I was just healthy enough for them to put me back on a plane. I went back over. The team was now 4-4. Here comes Ed to the rescue, according to them. We ended up winning the next 2 games. I scored a couple touchdowns in those last games. We went over to Scotland to play in the World Bowl. And then that's what, then I got back here to the States. But initially, Katie, I thought just as fast as it started, it was over. And, like you say, you're talking about injury as a part of football. And it's one of those situations where, you're talking about devastating. If it would have worked out any other way, not only would I have lost my football career, but I would have lost my, walked away from that 9, almost 10 years of professional baseball. But, everything worked out the way it was supposed to. God had a plan for me. And, I look back on it now, and there were some days where I had serious doubt and, what the heck was I doing? But like I said, it all worked out according to the plan.
Very cool. Well, and behind you, I see you've got the Eagles. And
yeah.
And I know you played for the Detroit Lions and we had talked about off mic, the Atlanta Falcons.
Yeah.
I know that might be an unfair question, but what was your favorite team that you played on?
It is you're seeing behind me, I got too much junk in here. I got my Falcons jerseys, things like that. I played 2 years with the Falcons, 97, 98, and without any doubt, my 2 years in Atlanta were the best, not only of my football career, but my entire career. I was able to kind of put my stamp on things as far as my career. I was able to play in a Super Bowl. I was on the 98 NFC Championship team, the Atlanta Falcons, which ended up going to a Super Bowl to play against Denver. We ended up losing. It was John Elway's last game. But to cap off my part of my career, because I ended up playing after that, I went to Detroit, Philly. I also played in the XFL as well, the first rendition of it, which turned out to be my last year in 2001 it was. But when I tell you I was able to really fulfill some dreams and kind of realize some things, all the hard work, everything I put in, and to be able to, like I said, play in a Super Bowl. My brother ended up playing, he played 8, almost 9 years in the league. He never even, got to the championship game, and the year I actually went to the Super Bowl, he was actually in San Fran with Jerry Rice and Steve Young and Garrison Hurst and Terrell Owens. They were actually in the same division with us at the time. It was still the old NFC West. We actually played them twice during the regular season, which we split. Then we had to play a third time in the divisional round to see who went to play Minnesota to get to the Super Bowl. So, you're talking about great family moments. My brother and I being out on the field together, man. And to be honest with you, my very first game I was active in the NFL was against my brother and the Saints in 97. So you're talking about some great moments and memories, not just for myself, but on our entire family, mom and dad being out there with us, coming to games and seeing both their boys. One of them who used to be a minor league baseball player, now we were both playing in the NFL together, was a dream come true. But yeah, definitely my time in Atlanta was, the most special of all the 15 years of sports. And, I left a lot of blood and some tears and a whole lot of things out there. Like I said, it was all well worth it in the end.
That's amazing. Well, real quick, what is it like to play against your sibling as opposed to just playing, just a normal game with not in that scenario?
Those were, it's funny, just amazing, because for years, I was playing minor baseball. My brother was in college. I would go see him when he was at Notre Dame. I saw some of the biggest Notre Dame rivalry games when you're going back to when, Miami, Notre Dame, Michigan, Notre Dame, some of those real great ones. I was actually in the stands for those. In turn, he used to come out and catch me whenever he could. I remember after he got drafted in the NFL, first thing he did, my mom and dad, they all came out to see me. I was in AA with the Brewers at the time. They came out to see me in El Paso, Texas. So all through our careers, he's coming to watch me, I'm coming to watch him. And when it all came about, and all of a sudden now I had made it into the NFL, and we're standing out on the same field. I'm not in the stands. I'm actually on the same field. And I remember we both purposely, during the national anthem, we stood directly across from each other, right on about the 50-yard line. And to look across at him and see him, and, I was always so proud of him, what he had done in the NFL. Now all of a sudden his big brother had pulled this crazy stunt off, and we're standing on the same field. You're talking about your heart's ready to explode. And I'll tell you the realization one time, and it might have been our second or third time playing against each other, we were trying to lock the game up, and it was an onside kick. And I was on the very far end. I was on the front line on our hands team. And all of a sudden over, and we're getting ready for this onside kick. And all of a sudden over my shoulder, I hear this familiar voice, "Don't drop it. Don't be nervous. It's my brother messing with me." And I was just like, it was that, you're talking about a surreal moment where I was just like, man, shut up, leave me alone, And I'll give you a real quick story. I don't want to bore you too much, but
no.
When I was it was my second year, he was in San Fran, so it was my third year in the league. We would always have this rituals when mom and dad would come out and watch wherever we were, especially when we were playing against each other. We always went out to dinner the night before. So on this particular night, he came in from San Fran, mom, dad, myself, we all go out to dinner, take him back to their hotel, and I'm taking him back to his to drop him off. And he told me, he said, look at them. They were watching, because I was on the different special teams units. And he said, Ed, don't tell anybody I told you this. He said, they were watching film, getting ready for a game. Our special teams coach, said they were going to try to attack you on the left wing because I was on the field goal unit. I was on the left wing. The last guy, you had to step down, then get the guy, the screamer off the edge.
Right.
He's like, yeah, he's like, make sure you're real tough on that inside because they were kind of going to come after me. I was like, I appreciate that. The heads up, bro, and that just goes to prove, blood is thicker than water or whatever. Because I remember that game, especially, I made sure I was extra, attentive to that inside gap, just to make sure. But, like I said, that was funny. He told me that little tidbit and I made sure I did what I was supposed to do on that particular team.
I love that. Well, so the both worlds, playing baseball and playing football. I mean, obviously I get the vibe that if you had to pick, you'd pick baseball. And then second question, what is more like camaraderie? Like which sport has more of like, I literally feel my team behind me? First off, baseball was my first love. If I had to do it all over again, I'd do the same thing. I'm not as fond of the game today because once you start playing as a professional, it turns into business. And I went through a whole bunch of mess as far as that goes. But like I said, I love the game of baseball from the time I was a toddler, would always make that choice. I don't care what alternate universe I was in. I would always go back to baseball as my first love. The fact that, I was able to play at the highest level, meaning football, because people always ask me, which one did you enjoy more? Or the longer question, the one that baseball was always, it's a team sport, but it's also very singular because when I'm up there against a pitcher, it's me against him. I could have a great day on the baseball field. I could go 4 for 4 with 2 home runs, 6 RBIs, and have the greatest of the day, but we got beat by 16, just one of those bad days for the team. I'm feeling great. Team is feeling horrible. Same thing on the reverse. There are times when I'd be like 0 for 4, but we end up just stomping somebody. So I'm looking at my stats for the day, and it's like, doggone, I had a horrible day. I booted one in the field, 2 strikeouts, pop up to the pitcher, So baseball has a tendency, even though it's a team sport, it really is individual sometimes. Football, Katie, the ultimate in teamwork and camaraderie is the sport of football, because I always tell people, if one person on a football field, meaning on a particular play, is not handling his business, meaning knows his assignment, executes his assignment, one person can be the difference between a play that is 2-yard loss or an 80-yard touchdown run. Because it's like, I don't care what your assignment is, it could be as simple as just cutting somebody off on the backside as a tight end. You let the guy get across your face, and all of a sudden your running back sees that perfect cutback lane, but boom, you didn't handle your business. He's tackled, like I said, for a loss. Whereas if the smallest thing, you make sure you cut that guy off or make him go the long way around, running back sneaks out that backside, 80 yards later, it's a touchdown. And I remember the feeling, baseball, really exciting. You play 160 games in a season. It's only so many times you can get excited for those 160, It's time to play ball, you come out the dugout. I tell you, Katie, there's nothing like coming out of a tunnel on a Sunday in the NFL, and especially as the games got ratcheted more up, like, playoffs and then going to a Super Bowl. I remember what it felt like to this day. I still get goosebumps when the Super Bowl, when it comes around every year, and people always want to hear the story. What was it like? And I tell you, it was one of those things where I could not have imagined, like I said, just a few short years earlier, being a minor league baseball player. Now all of a sudden I'm coming out the tunnel on Super Bowl Sunday. And it just, like I said, even to this day, when I think about it, I get just chills because of how exciting it was. And, like I said, just the whole thing, that sport and that whole atmosphere, and even just a regular Sunday in the NFL. Like I said, if you weren't excited and hyped and get ready, that's a good way to get your head knocked off, Oh,
so
sure.
It was, like I said, getting ready for a Sunday in the NFL, like, is nothing like it.
Just unbelievable. Now, and I love to ask this question no matter what someone's occupation is, but specifically since you obviously were in the limelight, an athlete, and maybe even in high school, obviously I know you were, very popular. What is it like how do I say this? Like to have people around you that maybe not be the best for you. Is that something that you learned through time or?
I was always one of those kids. First, I was very introverted. I was very quiet, even growing up. And my morals and my values and everything I got, Katie, I have nobody to thank more for that than my mother and my father. Just me and my brother, like as I mentioned, just the two of us. But the way my mom and dad raised us, and I lost my dad about 3 years ago, a little over 3 years ago. But the foundation that he and my mother instilled in my brother and myself, that carried me through my entire athletic career, my personal life, professional on and off the field, et cetera, et cetera. You don't have to be a professional athlete for trouble to be looming out there. And a lot of times the biggest trouble come from the people that you are hanging around with. And the more popular you get and the more money, or at least the more money people think you're making and the type of friends you run around with, it can be such a trap. What I always, like I said, I always fell back on the teachings that I got from my mom and dad earlier. And I'm not going to say I didn't make some mistakes out there, but one, you learn from the mistakes and you also try to minimize the trouble that you get. There's little trouble and then there's big trouble. And fortunately for me, there were a lot of times I could have went this way, could have went that way. And that little voice in my head always reminded me, and you don't ever want to do something stupid like that. What would you say to your mother and father or my grandmother? I didn't want to be that dude where calling everybody, you're going to see some stuff on the news. And I'm sorry I did it, but I promise I won't do it again. Never wanted to be that guy. And like I said, I had plenty of opportunity because of, like I said, the environment I was living in. It was really right for it to be around the wrong people. And I saw some of my teammates and friends just in general sometimes take those wrong paths and go the wrong way. And, my dad had a saying, used to always say, therefore, but the grace of God go I, meaning whatever somebody else is going through, very easily could have been me. And I thank God that, I was blessed enough to get the teachings early, and then not just get the teachings, but follow them. And, nobody's perfect, Katie. But like I said, if you try to live a good life, the reward is, good times, more good times than bad. And I'm very fortunate that, like I said, more times than not, I made the right decisions. And that included the people that I wanted to be in my life and share things with and sometimes not follow.
Right. No, totally. Yeah, shout out to your parents and your moral compass, right?
Yeah, and like I said, it's no pat on the back. It's just because like I said, there's trouble waiting around every corner, and I try to do whenever I have an opportunity. One of my favorite things to do, I'm a motivational speaker today. I go out and I talk to kids. That my biggest thing is just kind of trying to preach to them, and not necessarily preach, just illustrate. That's even a better word. Illustrate to them. There are a lot of things out there waiting for you. Just trying to make some of the right decisions, and also that, hey, every now and then we're going to trip, we're going to fall, not make the right decision, but don't compound it. There's, and then always, just try to get them to listen more than they sometimes do. I
understand. So after, your the NFL career came to a close, what was that like emotionally? I always say vibes. Like, what was that like? Vibes. What was that experience like? Was it very hard for you? Was it?
It wasn't hard for me because I always saw myself as more than an athlete, and I knew that at some point, you were going to have to at least hang those shoes up in terms of playing on the field. And you're never prepared for it unless you're somebody, like a Tom Brady, when you can pick and choose when it's time for your career to be over. For most of it, it's just taken from you because you're either, like in my case, I was too old to make the type of money that they would have to pay me, because you can go get a shinier new model, which was cheaper, so I had to face that fact. But at the same time, I knew it was time for just as I did with baseball, it was time for the second third or fourth chapter, whichever was going to be in my life, So, initially I took a little time off. I officially retired, or let's just say my agent wasn't able to find a job in 2001, because quite honestly, if I could still play today, I would, but obviously you can't. So I took a little time off around 2001, started thinking about some of the things I was going to do in the next chapter of Ed. And, fortunately for me, after 2001, obviously we're in the year 2022 now, I've accomplished some great things. I took a stab initially at, doing some financial planning. I went and got my Series 6, my 63, life, health, annuities, all that stuff. And I did that for a little bit. Found out I didn't want to do that for the rest of my life, so I took a little more figuring out. Started, wrote my own book, which was published had my autobiography published in 2005, along with, 2011, started on radio for the first time. Here I am 12 years later. I have my show Easy Sports Talk, which I just celebrated 5+ years being on the air with Easy Sports Talk on KDUS 1060 AM out here. So, along with speaking, trying to be a good person. Like I said, I've held different jobs in the professional world. At the same time, I sort of continue to try to inspire some of our kids out there and do different things. I think I've done a good job here at, like I said, 52 years old, continuing to try to be the best I can. And, in the beginning, it was tough. No longer being an athlete on the field and everybody's always calling your name and this, that, and the other thing. But I still consider what I do very valuable. I'm not doing it in front of 80,000 people anymore on a Sunday, but what I do and how I do it, I take a lot of pride in it, and very, consider myself very blessed all these years later, because I've seen, Katie, I've seen a lot of athletes who did not know anything other than being an athlete. And that's dangerous when your entire identity is staked on that, and all of a sudden all the cheers go away and people no longer want to call you, and you're the first on their call list to either do something, or they want to call you because they want to tell you how great you are or how you played last week. When that all goes away, you don't have something else to tide you or to continue on. It can be a lonely life, and it can also be a life where, maybe you start making some bad decisions because you're always looking for that high of what that type of lifestyle used to bring to you. And like I said, it can be dangerous. I've seen a lot of guys, if nothing else, make bad choices because of boredom, or because, like I said, they're still chasing that old high of being a professional athlete.
Yes, I have always, I don't want to say I've always been a weird kid, but I pretty much, I've always been a weird outside the box. But that is something that I have studied with athletes, is it's almost an identity crisis.
Yes, absolutely. And it, like I said, you think about it, it can be addicting. For so many years, and it got to a point, Katie, for me, it was just so natural, to go out and work in front of that many people. And it's nothing like, being a professional athlete, everywhere you go, everybody wants to comp you this, and, hey, you're the greatest, patting you on the back, and, oh, you played in a Super Bowl. And then all of a sudden that all goes away. And it's amazing how fast and for somebody like me, I was always just a worker bee, but it really does. Like I said, when it goes away, it just goes away. And you have to really figure out what's next. And some guys they're always searching for that, or they still want that. And like I said, when it was time for me to walk away from the game, like I said, I had no problem doing it. And to this day, I look back on my career with fondness, but I'm even more excited about things that I'm doing now than I did, back then. And, not everybody can figure that out. And I always, you can tell when guys are sometimes in trouble, because, like I said, they're still trying to find that high. But, I'm sure you've seen a lot of it in your studies, and, a lot of athletes. You can tell sometimes just by how guys, and, ladies as well, because, just athletes in general, when you can tell just from their conversations sometimes whether they've gotten past it, or the first thing they want to talk about, well, I was a professional athlete and I did this and that, and they want to run down their career all the time. And, sometimes people will say to me, someone's like pulling teeth to get you to talk about what, like what you use. And I'm like, because that was cool, but I'd rather talk about the things that you do. Like I'm fascinated with people that are musicians or, doctors or this. I want to talk more about what you're doing and what you've done. At the same time, they want to find out, what was it like to do this or do that. So, for me, that's, like I said, it's always a sign when, I know some guys, like I said, here we are all these years later, and the only thing they still want to talk about the glory days instead of what they're doing now. And that's a bad sign usually.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, how did you, get into radio? And how did the second question is, how did you get out to Arizona?
Yeah, well, for Arizona, I started coming out here all the way back in 1992. I was traded from the White Sox to the Brewers in the summer of 91. So I finished that season with the Brewers, and then my spring training changed from Florida to here in Arizona. So I started coming out and spending my winters. And then, I'd go away and play ball. And then when I switched over to football, I was back in East for a while. I spent my 7 years in Atlanta. And then in 2003, it was kind of one of those things where I just kind of got, my brother was out here, had a house. Mom and dad were spending more time out here. I was down in Atlanta by myself. I started coming back out. Next, you caught the bug, and here I am all these years later. So I've been officially back out here since 2003, and I love it. As far as radio, it was a fluke. I had been, I'd always done media, and we're going back to 90 or 2011, podcasts and different things were out there. But, radio was one of those things that I almost got just talked into. Someone who had heard about my book, they asked me some of the things that I wanted to do. And I was like, I'm not quite sure. And next, they were talking about, you ever think about doing radio? And I thought, no, not really. And I ended up I did a Saturday night show, which was my first taste in radio. Started doing, it was an hour show from 8 to 9 on Saturday nights on this little Christian station out here, Katie. And, I didn't know anything was going to ever come of it, but I started doing that, and, producing it myself. I had my, the person who she was actually running my board and things like that. She wanted to learn that side of it. So we started working together. And the next thing I know, after about a year and a half, I took a break from that show, but others here in the Valley had been following me and hearing me on the radio. And I started guest spotting on all these different shows. And next thing you know, there was a spot that my spot opened up on, at the time it was NBC Sports Radio out here, 1060 AM, which is still 1060, but it's now Sports Map. The affiliates change from time to time. But they talked me into, hey, we should look at maybe doing a show together. And, and I thought, well, I did radio in the past. It was fun. And, went to the station. We kind of hashed some things out. Next thing you know, the Easy Sports Talk Show did its first show. Was it March 4th, 2017? And here I am in the same time slot every Saturday from 10 to 12, 5 years and some change later. And it's been, one of the best things I've done. It's allowed me to not just do my show, but as I mentioned, I have the privilege of doing shows like yours. I've done countless spots on ESPN. I'm asked, especially during the football season, I'm usually doing 3 or 4 either podcasts or spots on ESPN across the country and just kind of growing that. So radio was not something that was on my radar initially, but I've been told I'm pretty good at it. And, I've learned a whole lot. I run my own equipment because we do live remotes around the Valley. So I know how to do the Comrex unit. I help produce. I produce the show every week as far as putting it together. And, and my radio partner, Javon, we've been together 3.5 years. I had an original partner who stepped away after a year and a half. Javon came and sat in the seat. So, I've learned a lot, and, it's a great feeling, every week to do the show. And, we talk about the local teams out here. We also do a lot of national stuff, and we, support a lot of nonprofits, charitable organizations through our show. And I get a lot of pride out of it.
That's amazing. Well, yes, you do have a very welcoming voice. Great. You really do.
I hate my voice more than life itself, Katie. It's funny. I've never listened to a full show of my own, even though I keep them all archived and everything like that. When I hear, because I always, after we do the shows, we have our live guests, and I always clip the shows so I can send to them. And I cannot stand hearing my voice. It's funny. People are always like, "Oh, you got a great radio voice." I'm like, "Oh my God, I hate hearing myself." So, but as long as people keep telling me that I do, I'll believe them, and I'll just keep moving forward. Keep it moving.
Well, that's so interesting that you say that, because I have heard that a lot from other interviews, is people always say to me, I hate the way that I sound.
Yeah. And it's ironic that, I'm heard all around the place sometimes, and a lot of people listen, but myself, like I said, I refuse. And I'm talking about all types of interviews. I've done everything. Like I said, ESPN, we do our 2-hour show. I do podcasts. I've done TV stuff, and it's just, goodness, I don't know what it is.
Well, it's kind of cool though. That's kind of cool.
Yeah.
You just send it into the universe, and so be it, right?
As long as, I guess it's a good thing. Like if people ever told me that I didn't have a good radio voice, and I'd kind of figure out what I've been doing with myself all this time, still doing radio. But, people, like I said, more than anything, especially with my radio partner, Javon Adams, we love to laugh. We also do the Believe in Arizona podcast, Cardinals podcast together. So and he has other stuff that he does that I collaborate with him. And we have so much fun doing the show. The second it becomes non-fun for me, Katie, I would walk away from it in a minute. As long as it continues to be fun, I think we put out a good product in terms of the things that we talk about. And we also have the ability to help a whole lot of people through, like I said, bringing awareness. Like a couple weeks ago, we did a whole spot. We had someone from the Arizona Humane Society. They had a big event coming up. I got a last minute request. Can we come on and maybe you can, or tell people a little bit about, I was like, nah, we'll do better than that. We'll have you on for a portion of one of the segments so you can tell everybody about the event and what you're doing right from your mouth and lips. So as long as we can continue to help the community, help organizations, I have fun. And like I said, we put together good shows. I'm good.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, like I said, and props to you for giving back to the community and, just even being a motivational speaker. I mean, I'm sure you've touched so many lives that you have no idea.
I try. Like I said, my biggest thing is just want to make sure, and I have an 11-year-old son. I just want to always make sure that I'm giving good example for him and anybody else I can assist. And I mentioned it earlier, Katie, I'm nowhere near perfect. I got as many flaws as anybody else out there. But if anything I've been through, both negative and positive, can assist somebody else in maybe realizing a dream or chasing something that they didn't think was attainable, or staying away from this, or if I can assist, in any way, I love those opportunities and the platforms that we have, including what you're doing with your show. I think you're going to do amazing in what you do. Just sometimes you just get a feel for when you're speaking to somebody. I can tell this is going to be something you're good at, and who knows who you're going to touch. And that's, like I said, every time I step behind the mic or get up on a stage or whatever it is, or even just have a conversation with someone at a coffee shop, if I can be some type of positive in their life, that's what we're all here for, in my opinion.
Oh, well, thank you so much. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
2 more questions. So obviously, since you live sports and now, you're in sports radio and observing sports, do you think it's a different, is sports the same as it once was? Like, you know what I mean?
No, I know exactly what you mean. And the answer is absolutely not. And you know what changed? What's changed it all, Katie, is obviously I think back to when I was young and playing, this whole thing with social media, and it can be good and it can be bad. I think a lot of the new generation, sometimes it's more about their brand than it is about chasing a passion or trying to deliver a positive message. And it goes for athletes, comedians, actors, whatever it is. Our whole society has changed. A lot of it has to do with the exposure and what is considered good and bad press these days. Being an athlete today, in my opinion, is so much tougher because there's nowhere you can go to hide or not be in the limelight these days. And, like I said, when we were young, some of my teammates, we laugh about it all the time now. When we were on some of our long road trips, acting stupid and doing dumb things, thank God there weren't cameras and things out there, and every single thing was being caught and immediately for consumption. Here's how far I'm going to take you back, Katie. It was your biggest fear back then was being in the newspaper.
Right.
And if it did get out there, hopefully it was just in the local paper and it was just a 1 day news cycle. Now something happens and immediately you're not even done with whatever the activity is and you're already seeing live shots of XYZ in a bad light. Or, for instance, and you'll notice too, especially getting into the media here, you have to be careful about even just what you say from moment to moment. If it's not totally politically correct, careers can be lost in a moment, just because of the many a slip between the cup and the lip. So as far as sports, it's like I said, it's the same thing all the way across in society. Everything has changed. A lot of it has to do with the amount of social media and things that are out there, and they can be a blessing and a curse all rolled up into one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, obviously I'm not an athlete, but I agree with what you're saying just because, I always say, even if you're not if you're not in the limelight, there's always a camera.
Everywhere.
It's always, someone's always watching you. And a fun kind of, I don't know if this is fun, but I am very intrigued. I always tell people I love the old show Unsolved Mysteries with Robert Stack back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
And my favorite segment was The Unexplained.
Okay.
So was wanting to know to end on a different note, is there anything that you've experienced that obviously that you'd like to share, that whether it was, did you see a ghost? Did you hear something that wasn't there? Like anything like that in that realm?
That's a great question. I would say that I'm a very spiritual person. I don't make it to church every Sunday, but I believe in God. I know, I'm not necessarily calling ghosts or anything like that, but I think there are spirits and things that are always around us. And I've had instances throughout my life when I've been at the quietest moments, Katie, and maybe just contemplating something. And it's always something will let me know that someone is thinking about me, whether it be I think I mentioned I lost my dad a few years ago. I lost so many good people, grandmothers, one of my best friends, Eric Dixon, lost him to a sudden heart attack way back in 2002. So all these things have been around me, and there are times when I just know for a fact someone is trying to let me know that, hey, just want to let you know I'm thinking about you, or you were contemplating this. I want to let you know this is my opinion on it. And somehow, and I can say it could be something, a note that I wrote 2 years ago and thought I lost it and find it in a binder somewhere. Or I just always feel like there's, as you call it, the unexplained. And there's, and not to get too deep, but for me, the thought that at some point, God willing, I live to be 90 years old, die peacefully with my family and everybody surrounding me. The thought that we just close our eyes and everything goes to black. With all the things that we see in this world, the fact that our planet is not bumping into every other planet out there, there's something put this all together. And for me, just the thought of, like I said, that there's not something guiding us, and that means some of our people that have been here before us. I don't buy that. Something like I said, I've had those moments where I know in my mind there some of my loved ones from behind have been just letting me know that they're okay and just want to check on me.
No, that's awesome. Well,
that is a great question too. That's something that is, I've done 1,000 interviews, and that's one that, like I said, I always love when somebody comes up with something, out of the box or something original. That I love that. So continue on with that.
Well, thank you. Like I said, that means a lot. Well, I guess I ask it too because I have experienced those things. So I'm very spiritual as well, and just believe that, like, even though the vessel may be gone, like the spirit is still, there. Everyone's spirit is
Absolutely.
still around. So, well, Ed Smith, that's it.
One down and a whole bunch more to go, Katie. And you're going to be absolutely fabulous at doing this. And as I mentioned, anytime or anything I can do to continue to, assist, you have any questions, anything like that, down the road, we'll keep in touch. I'd love to have you on our show, whether it's the Cardinals podcast or our Saturday show. Like I said, I'm grateful that you reached out, and I'm looking forward to staying in touch too.
Yes, thank you so much. Like I said, thank you so much. This was such a joy.